I introduce Dr. Oscar A. Anderson, President of Augsburg College.
Thank you, Dean Quanbeck, esteemed colleagues and fellow Augies. I'm a little in a quandary as to how to begin, considering the difficulty that we had with the bleachers yesterday at chapel and seeing the fine crowd here today. I might begin as the Chief Justice Earl Warren once began an address. He said, "I'm glad to see such a dense audience here today." And one wag hollered, "You don't know what you're talking about. We're not as dense as you think we are." I began by telling the faculty that when I spoke to them, my knees were applauding. When I spoke to the freshmen, I told them I wasn't quite sure what it meant that a person had to be a freshman twice in the same institution. And now to speak to you is another matter, the student body, but it's a real privilege, and I'm pleased for the opportunity to be able to address you today. But as one who has been taken in as an honorary member of the freshman class, may I, on their behalf and my own, ask you to be as charitable as possible. I would also indicate to you today how proud I am to be identified with you and all who comprise Augsburg College. There is a very real sense in which pride is sinful. The Greeks talked about hybris, self-elevation, a destructive character within man described in biblical terms as rebellion, the reason for man's problem. But there is such a thing as a healthy pride, a pride that has in it satisfaction, appreciation, and a note of gratitude. We use the word pride, for example, when we speak of civic pride, and we know that that's a good thing. Up there in the Red River Valley where I came from, this red-hot town of Moorhead that he was talking about, and you don't know how red-hot it could get between Moorhead State and Concordia College sometimes. There were towns where you could tell the citizenry had a real pride in the community, and there were other places where you wondered whether they had actually arisen above the animal level. Civic pride. Now the Apostle Paul, in the 21st chapter of Acts, is standing before the captain of the guard who has just arrested him after a riot in Jerusalem, and the captain is quite sure that he has a criminal on his hands. And he makes an accusation, and Paul brings himself up to his full height, and he says, "I am a Jew of Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city." Now, Tarsus was not a mean city, a city in Asia Minor, strategically located on the seaboard and on a wagon road. It was a university center. It was noted for politics, for culture, and for commerce. It has been said that Paul's status as a citizen of Tarsus and of the Roman Empire was one of the factors which fitted him to be an apostle to the Gentiles. A man's citizenship has something to do with his life and with his work. Paul, therefore, was never apologetic, never ashamed, never diffident about his native city. As I noticed some of you freshmen were in the line at our house at the reception last Sunday, I would ask some of you, "Where are you from?" And once in a while, someone would whisper, "North Dakota." And I would say, "Well, now, what town?" "Well, it's a town near Fargo." Well, what's the name of it?" "Gallshoot." "Oh, I've heard of Gallshoot." "You have?" Suddenly things are right again. Somebody's actually heard of my town. "Where are you from?" Paul said, "I'm from Tarsus, and I'm a citizen of no mean city." Augsburg College, of which you and I have come now to be a part, can appropriately be thought of as a city. And now we are its citizens. And my concern this morning is that when we are asked to identify ourselves, we will know why we can throw back our shoulders, lift our heads, and say, with our names of Augsburg and a citizen of no mean city. I think it's appropriate to think of Augsburg College as a city in itself. Let me give you some reasons. For one thing, our college bears the name of a city, Augsburg, Germany, a city which was founded in the year 15 BC by Augustus, who became Caesar and was Caesar at the time of the birth of Christ. It became known in history, for one thing, as the home of the great merchant princes and bankers, the Fuggers of Augsburg. And if there are any descendants of the Fuggers still living, I think the development department ought to get after them. Augsburg is known as one of the Reformation cities, together with Wittenberg or the Wartburg. There is Augsburg. No one has yet had the courage to name a college after Worms. But when you think in history of Augsburg, you think of the Augsburg Confession, 1530, the Peace of Augsburg, 1555. So this institution bears the name of a city. Augsburg College, for another thing, is located in the heart of a great city. In this sense, it is unique among Lutheran colleges. There are other Lutheran colleges located in cities. But to be right down in the heart of the city is the unique situation of this institution. And therefore we carry a certain metropolitan stamp. We have the characteristics of a city college. And we are, so to speak, a city within a city. The sociologists use the term the inner city. I like to think of Augsburg as an inner city within the city. Augsburg College shares also many of the problems of the city. Overcrowding, insufficient housing, traffic and parking problems, and all the difficulties of the commuter. Integration, not between the races, but between the home-based and the dorm-based student. And then there are always perennial fiscal difficulties. A college is a microcosm of urban problems. At least this college is. But Augsburg is education in the context of urban life. And we know that in the future this is going to characterize all of our country. Urban life. And therefore Augsburg embodies the dynamic processes of a metropolis. The things which make a city vital and vibrant, interesting, and having a magnetic attraction. You remember the old song, how can you keep them down on the farm when once they've seen Paris? There are the things which make a city the hallmark of culture, the symbol of a people. Lewis Mumford has written a book which is perhaps definitive as far as the history of cities is concerned. He sees the city in history as significant in man's mental, social, cultural, and religious development because it has provided at least 4 positive forces or factors in human life. In the first place, the city is protective. The first cities grew up around fortresses, citadels. Men came together so that they could live in peace and work in security beneath the fortress or behind the wall. The city provides protection. The city also provided a place for the shrine, the temple. Mumford quotes an old Egyptian scribe as saying that the mission of the founders of cities was to put the gods in their places. In other words, to put at the center of the city the highest concern of those who lived within it. The third factor that is present in the city is symbiosis, to use a 2-bit term, which simply means living together. It's the positive good that comes from close association between merchant and priest and scholar and artist and scientist and patriot and warrior, producing the 4th dynamic factor, namely dialogue, dramatized by the arena, the law court, the trial, the parliament, the sport field, council meeting, the debate. Mumford adds, perhaps the best definition of the city in its highest aspects is to say that it is a place designed to offer the widest facilities for significant conversation. In a sense, the dramatic dialogue is both the fullest symbol and the final justification of the city's life. These factors of protection and of living together, of providing a shrine and dialogue, these make the city a fitting symbol for a college city like Augsburg. Here there is, in a sense, protection, withdrawal in order to protect against ignorance. In the charter of Harvard College, you will find that the purpose of the institution is stated that the colonies shall be protected against an ignorant ministry. A college is, in a sense, a citadel. Here also is a shrine. For in every college there is some object of ultimate concern. There is always a God. No institution of learning is without some God. As Luther said, that these are Gott oder Abergott, or Abgott, the false God or the true God. And if it isn't the true God revealed in Jesus Christ, then it's man, or society, or the state, or some political order. Here also is this living together of teacher and pupil, of young and old, of scientist, artist, philosopher, musician, writer, rich, poor, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, Norwegian, Swede, white, yellow, red, black, living to understand and respect and receive from each other. Here is dialogue, conversation between people who respect each other and want to listen and want to share. It is out of this kind of dialectic that there comes a mental war that arms the mind and trains the reason. Augsburg, then, is a college city. You and I are its citizens. You see, basically what I'm discussing this morning is our Augsburg citizenship, yours and mine, for we are all fellow citizens of this academic community. And let's look at it in terms of the pride of our citizenship, the exercise of our citizenship, and the limits of our citizenship. First of all, there is the pride of our citizenship. Augsburg is no mean city because of the people who comprise her citizenry. And I'm looking right at you students. I am proud to be associated with you. You made a decision to live, educationally speaking, in this college city. Because you believe that Augsburg can give you a good liberal arts education on the one hand, and an education with a standpoint on the other. One which provides both perspective and purpose. I want to believe that you have made the choice that Solomon made at the outset of his royal career, when he was given the opportunity to choose that which he wanted, now that he was king. But he didn't take power, nor prestige, nor comfort, nor success over his enemies. Rather, he chose wisdom. There are colleges which can provide prestige, creature comfort, and some of the things that are thought of in power terms in our day. Augsburg offers you an education, a Christian education. And I admire you for buying just that. As citizens of Augsburg, you students will be treated with respect. I think of Luther's old teacher Trebonius, who always bared his head on entering the classroom. For he said, I am in the presence of so many future burgomasters, chancellors, doctors, and regents. You will be given more responsibility than you will care to assume. For in this you will share perhaps the feeling of most citizens that they would just as soon be relieved of some responsibility. But you will have responsibility. You will have responsibility for your fellow students and their welfare. You will have responsibility for the success of the educational activity that takes place here. You will have responsibility for the integrity of your own character, for you are writing your own letters of recommendation. You will have responsibility for the reputation of your college. You will have responsibility for the maintenance of the plant, for its cleanliness and its neatness, and its upkeep. We're crowded when we have problems, but we've all got to get together on this. You will have responsibility for the spirit of the Augsburg family. You will have responsibility also for the future of this institution as it continues to develop. Furthermore, you will be accepted as those whose first purpose at Augsburg is to get an education, and specifically the kind of education that Augsburg exists to give. We will proceed a priori that you are here to learn, and that whatever contradicts or detracts from that avowed purpose will be avoided or removed. You will be expected, in other words, to give the lie to the assertion that to be college bred means a 4-year loaf requiring lots of dough and seldom self-raising. A city is people. A college is people. A college is more specifically a faculty. The pride of our Augsburg citizenship rises from being associated with educated, dedicated, and competent people who comprise the instructional force of this institution. This trinity of qualities makes a great teacher. Our faculty is long in each category, but our faculty is not satisfied at the present level of dedication, education, and competence. And I, for one, am proud to join my colleagues in the task of further building up the faculty to upgrade its own level of performance and to bring to Augsburg more faculty personnel who have a teaching competence, an educational preparation, and a dedicated spirit. And I would add also to this a sense of humor, for whom a hearty laugh is also a standard of excellence, who find a certain delight in stories and definitions about themselves, like a professor is one who went to college and never got out, or a professor is a textbook wired for sound, or a professor is one who talks in someone else's sleep. The pride of our citizenship is further nourished by the history of this institution. Now, perhaps some of you could care less about the historical heritage embodied in Augsburg, and yet the mark of your maturation will be your appreciation for and your emulation of the qualities of your college's heritage. There is an Augsburg for you and me today, because for 94 years a comparatively small group of men and women have been willing to become involved, have been willing to do what 20th century man is too often unwilling to do, stick his neck out, to sacrifice for education, to fight for principle, to stand for freedom, and to struggle for excellence. History may judge some of them to be right or wrong, but they were never in doubt. To be at Augsburg is to walk with persons like August Winas, the first president of this institution, whose great-grandson has enrolled at Augsburg this year. The Sverdrups, Uftedal, Cy Melby, Bernard Christensen, Leif Harbo. You can be proud, as I can, to be in such company, and ask only to be worthy of them. May I say a word about my predecessors? 3 of the classes here knew Leif Harbo, one of Minnesota's greatest educators, a great spirit and a great administrator. Two of you of the classes here were here when Bernard Christensen was president, a man who gave a quarter of a century of leadership to this institution, a philosopher, a theologian, a teacher, an evangelist, a builder, an administrator. I became associated with Bernard Christensen as a student at Augsburg. In those days, Augsburg faculty members had less than they have now, and very few of them had cars. I had an old jalopy that I used to take my father, who was crippled at the time, to his work. And then on the way to college, I stopped and picked up Bernard Christensen and gave him a ride to school. This was the beginning of my association with him. And I will always be grateful for what he has done for me. And you and I will always be grateful for what he has done for this institution. Akin to the men who have made its history is the spirit that has pervaded this institution. I hope you've already sensed it as I have, and you will continue to contribute to it. The spirit of Augsburg is the spirit of faith. Faith in God, and faith in the purpose of this institution. It's the spirit of freedom, freedom of inquiry, freedom of expression, freedom of worship and freedom in worship, freedom of action, circumscribed only by the limits of love for one's fellow man, and the spirit of friendliness. Some of us are new here, and we're kind of fearful and a little confused. Like the fellow in Washington who was wearing a big button with K on it. Someone said, "What does that stand for? Kennedy?" He said, "No, it stands for confused." They said, "Don't you know that's spelled with a C?" He said, "That's how confused we are." But it's the friendliness of Augsburg that dispels our fears. And I hope that we can keep it that way. That there will always be the friendly high on the campus. That it will be considered a mortal sin not to greet your fellow students and to give them a friendly smile. Augsburg is no place for long faces, so long that you could eat oatmeal through a gas pipe. We can be proud of our city, our college, because of its enterprise, its citizens, its history, its spirit, and its opportunities. In nations, societies, and institutions, certain persons or groups have been honored with difficult assignments. It's a compliment to have been given a tough job. Augsburg has been chosen for a tough job because of its character, its history, and its location. And therefore, I say to you today that church, community, and sister colleges are saying to Augsburg, and that means you and me and all of us, prove that you can educate youth down in the heart of a teeming city. Prove that you can serve as an educational institution to the vast constituency of Lutherans in this Lutheran heartland. Prove that you can unite a student body, half resident and half commuting, into a homogeneous whole. Prove that you can do a job of education from the Christian standpoint with the metropolitan student who lives at home. Prove that you can keep your identity and your distinctiveness while living across the street from one of the largest public institutions of learning in the world. Prove that you can gain the confidence of a skeptical community where you are the only accredited liberal arts college and that you have a unique quality Christian education to offer for which you make no apology. And I'm afraid they are also saying, prove that you can all do all of this without running up a bigger operating deficit. No, we may not have a lot of things externally to impress people with, impressive buildings or a grand campus layout to which we may point with pride. Perhaps we should be thankful that it is not just yet our temptation to do so. For I am reminded of what Mumford points out regarding Athens in the days of Socrates and Sophocles. How significantly animated, varied, and rewarding were the rhythmic interplays of work and leisure, theory and practice, private life and public life, as art, gymnastic, music, conversation, speculation, politics, love, adventure, and even war flowed into one another. The picture of a city where the finest in human life and thought moved without external mechanisms or compulsions. Almost the description of the montage of a college. But how from the 4th century on, of Athens the diagnosis is made which sounds like the sentence of death. Buildings began to displace men. Augsburg needs buildings. It needs buildings of which it can be justly proud. But she will cease to be a great city when the first thing men say of her repeats the disciples of old. Look, teacher, what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings. A prediction of doom may follow. Citizens of no mean city, proud of our citizenship indeed, and ready, I hope, to exercise it. Abraham Lincoln once remarked, "I like to see a man proud of the place in which he lives. I like to see a man live in it so that the place will be proud of him." Now, this is no time for moralisms or preachments, but it is a time to say that Augsburg expects her citizens to be serious about the main business at hand, scholarship. Now, it's not hard to be serious, but it is difficult to be serious about the prosaic matters of classes, assignments, books, papers, tests. Yet this is the everyday stuff out of which scholarship is constructed. It is just these that need to be taken seriously. Robert Hutchins, at one time was the Chancellor of the University of Chicago, said it is not so important to be serious as it is to be serious about the important things. The monkey wears an expression of seriousness which would do credit to any college student, but the monkey is serious because it itches. College students can easily become serious about their itches, all the way from the romantic itch to the gastronomic. But the job we've got to tackle in earnest is the job of getting an education. Too often the situation is described by a story of an Eastern professor who came to the campus of the University of California. The Californian was showing his Eastern colleague around the campus, the great complexes, the huge buildings, the fine athletic facilities, and all the rest. And then the Eastern professor turned to his Western friend and he said, "And tell me, how many students did you say you had on this campus?" And his friend replied, "Oh, I would say about 1 out of every 100. Again, in terms of the history of the city, when citizens begin to focus on the peripheral instead of the central issues, exchanging the mental for the material, the spiritual for the sensual, decay sets in that spells destruction. The story of ancient Rome is always a warning, as our historian of cities points out. Let me quote, "Its history, namely Rome, presents a series of classic danger signals to warn one when life is moving in the wrong direction. Wherever crowds gather in suffocating numbers, wherever rents rise steeply and housing conditions deteriorate, wherever a one-sided exploitation of distant territories removes the pressure to achieve balance and harmony nearer at hand, There the precedents of Roman building almost automatically revive as they have come back today. The arena, the tall tenement, the mass contests and exhibitions, the sport matches, the international beauty contests, the striptease made ubiquitous by advertisement, the constant titillation of the senses by sex, liquor, and violence, all in true Roman style. So too the multiplication of bathrooms and the over-expenditure on broadly paved motor roads, and above all the massive collective concentration on glib ephemeralities of all kinds, performed with supreme technical audacity. These are the symptoms of the end. Magnifications of demoralized power, minifications of life. When these signs multiply, necropolis is near, though not a stone has yet crumbled, for the barbarian has already captured the city from within. Come, hangman, come, vulture. So far the quote. Collective concentration on glib ephemeralities. What a warning to any city, not least the college city. The priceless ingredient of all scholarship. What is it? About the time that I was a student at Augsburg College, a pharmaceutical company used a story in its commercials on the radio, and the radio had been discovered by the time I went to college. They used a story that was called The Priceless Ingredient. As I recall it, it was the story of a young man who made a certain product, but one day consulted a wise man on how to improve his product and be more successful. The advice of the wise man was, secure the priceless ingredient. The young man began his search. He went everywhere around the world, looking, searching, asking, where is the priceless ingredient? He returned home long after without it, and he came to the wise man and said, I have searched everywhere, and I cannot find the priceless ingredient. And then the wise man replied, the priceless ingredient is within you, because the priceless ingredient is the integrity of the maker. The priceless ingredient is the integrity of the scholar. Honesty, scrupulously and zealously maintained in assignments, papers, examinations, in reporting, discovering and reporting data, in facing the truth and its implications, and I would add, in examining one's own life. Citizens of no mean city, we are proud of our Augsburg citizenship. We are ready to exercise it with seriousness and integrity. But we must be aware also of its limitations. You see, the city is also a scriptural theme. Scripture begins in a garden, but it ends with a city. And if you study this theme of the city in Scripture, you will discover that there is a double emphasis. The rhythm moves from one to the other. On the one hand, the city, for all its glorious possibilities, symbolizes the impotence and the insolence of man. The pride of man in his own power and accomplishments is embodied in the city. And thus spread across the pages of Scripture you will find those woes. Woe unto you, Nineveh! Woe unto you, Babylon! Woe unto you, Samaria! Woe unto you, Jerusalem! On the other hand, the city is seen as redeemable and restorable only by the gracious power of God. I saw the heavens open, and the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven. God alone can ultimately remake the city, a symbol of human society. A college, like a city, is never a utopia. Disappointments are to be expected. It shares in all the weaknesses and foibles to which human flesh is heir. Its failures, its mistakes, its sins of omission and commission are all under the judgment of God. Woe unto you, Bethsaida! Woe unto you, Chorazin! Woe unto you, Capernaum! Woe unto you, Augsburg! Our greatest sin is that by which the angels fell, the temptation to intellectual pride. From the standpoint of eternity, we are a necropolis, a city of the dead. Our hope springs not from within us, or our own minds, or our own ingenuity. Our hope comes from beyond. And therefore, while citizens of no mean city, we claim another citizenship, as did the citizen of Tarsus, who wrote, "Our citizenship is in heaven, and from it we wait a Savior." While citizens here of no mean city, we have no abiding city, but we move toward that city whose builder and maker is God. He who exercises his college citizenship in Augsburg and who prizes his eternal citizenship in Christ is a true Augsburgian.